Silver Screen Specialist Showcase has begun.
This was terrible. That just sounds like you're done.
I'm sure there's plenty of potheads who found this so funny.
The following is a fan-off production.
They call me Alice in Wonderland. They try to lure me with a man. Go, oh, what do you know? Is that a rabbit hole? Oh, I gotta see where it goes. Off with my head, fell in love again. You lose your head, you lose your heart, fall apart, fall apart.
What is happening, everybody? Usually you would hear a very pretty, sexy voice come on first, and it would say something like, "Oh, what's up, all you stars and studs? This is current First Lady of Ring of Honor and former WWE Diva Maria Kanellis." However, unfortunately, Maria is not here tonight. Maria is off doing other things. So you have current Ring of Honor wrestler Michael Bennett taking over. I'm going solo. I'm flying stag. Give me some other terms. What else is? I'm podcast single tonight, I suppose. And unfortunately, the circumstances why Maria is not here is actually kind of sad. On Monday, Maria's uncle, Wayne, passed away. He had been diagnosed with colon cancer 6 months ago. Stage 4. It wasn't very positive, and the outlook was not very good. And unfortunately, Maria came into Boston to see me, and we were going to do this podcast together. But as many of you know, we are very family oriented, and we take our family very seriously. And Maria was extremely close to her uncle, and she's extremely close to her family. And so she is off back in Ottawa, being with her family, comforting her family. And so if you guys get the chance, shout out to her on Twitter, send her a message or a tweet or something on Facebook and let her know, because it's hit her pretty hard. And she's a very caring, loving person. And so if you get the chance, just, send your condolences and get back real soon, sweetie, because I miss you and I love you, and all the fans miss you and love you. So get back as quickly as you can. And on that note, I suppose I had a pretty busy weekend. We got the bad news on Monday, but the weekend prior to Monday, I was in Milwaukee and I was in Chicago for Ring of Honor. 2 sold-out shows, 2 great shows. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Ring of Honor is the best wrestling locker room in the entire country, the entire world. There's just top to bottom. The guys work their asses off to put on the best show they possibly can, and this was no different. Friday night in Milwaukee, another, I believe it was sold-out show. It was definitely up from the last time. Attendance was definitely up from the last time we were there. It was the crowd. The Milwaukee crowds are just absolutely insane. They're loud. They're drunk. They get into everything. They chant everything. At the end of the night, they were chanting shots because Matt Taven had promised everyone shots if he won the Ring of Honor World title. And so literally everything Taven did was followed up with a shot chant, or every punch he threw was a shot chant. And him and Adam Cole absolutely tore the house down in the main event. My buddy Adam Cole came out on top, which is awesome. But they tore the house down. Also, you had one of the coolest, most innovative, and hilarious matches I've ever seen, and that was Kevin Steen and the Young Bucks versus the Briscoe brothers and Michael Elgin. Just 6 unbelievable talents. That match was incredible. You had Chris Hero versus Roderick Strong. I'm trying to think what other matches you had. You had Jay Lethal versus Silas Young. Just a great show, top to bottom. And I had the privilege of wrestling a guy from Canada, I believe, Tyson Dukes, who I think he's done more than one appearance for Ring of Honor, but I got the chance to wrestle him. And if you guys have never seen this guy wrestle, he looks like a skinnier John Cena with a mohawk. Phenomenal shape, great look, but I had a blast working him. He's extremely talented. I believe he's been doing it for quite a long time. And I had the opportunity to get in the ring with him, and he's fantastic. I hope he's seen in Ring of Honor more often because he deserves a shot. And I really, truly appreciated and respected being in the ring with him, especially in front of that Milwaukee crowd who absolutely despised me. But they love to hate me because they love me. How can you not love me? Either that or they just love my fiance. I haven't quite decided which one. Probably my fiance, but that's all right. But yeah, and then after Friday, we took the long and exhausting trip to Chicago. But I'm being very sarcastic because it's only about an hour and a half drive from Milwaukee to Chicago. And, actually, me and Maria, we drove from Milwaukee to Ottawa, Illinois, which is where she's from. Because we actually had the opportunity to visit her Uncle Wayne at that moment. And I'm very happy that we took that trip because, like I said earlier, he passed away on Monday. And I'm very happy that I got the opportunity to see him one last time. And it was nice to see her family and to sit there and talk to them and, just a really great time. If you're with someone you love or, you're anyone in your family, tell them you love them, cherish them, hold on to them because life is far too short to be anything but happy and loving. And you just never know. And it's times like these that they bring up memories and they make you feel like life is way too short. So I was very happy to go see her Uncle Wayne. I hadn't really gotten the opportunity to get to know him that well. I had met him a few times, but because I'm from Boston and they live in the Illinois area, but the times I did get to were great. So I'm glad we got to this time right before the Chicago show. And actually, we made it a point for the Milwaukee show from my match with Tyson Dukes. We filmed it. So her uncle got the opportunity to watch me wrestle because I don't think he had ever seen me wrestle, which meant a tremendous amount to me. So, after we did that and I thoroughly enjoyed my day in Ottawa, Illinois. We drove to Chicago, which is about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from Ottawa. And another sold-out, amazing show Ring of Honor put on. I tell you, ever since 2014, we've been on a roll. And it's been unstoppable from Nashville to Pittsburgh to San Antonio. We've just kept going. And speaking of Ring of Honor and the topic we're talking about, our guest, former WWE commentator and current Ring of Honor play-by-play commentator and a good buddy of mine and a close friend and a mentor, Mr. Kevin Kelly. Are you there?
I am here. I took pity upon you. I threw crusts of bread your way and dug you out of, but bailed you out of jail in Mexico that one time.
That was a great night.
I know. That was a lot of fun.
How the hell are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm so sorry to hear about Maria and, her family and everything. And so.
Yeah, no, it's a tough time, but she's, as you well know, she's always the strong one. So she's kind of toughening up her bottom lip and putting her head down and going through it. And
now, is she like a real strong support system for her family, or does she rely on them?
No, she's there. She's kind of like the backbone. She's the strong. She's the strong type. Around me, she's a big ball of mush. But when she's with her family, she kind of puts on the mother role and's like, all right, let's do this. We got to get this done. And then when she comes around me, then it's all bets are off. But yeah, she plays the strong type. But what's new? I mean, I was just kind of running through this weekend with Ring of Honor in Milwaukee and Chicago, and just how Ring of Honor's kind of been on a roll since 2014.
Yeah, it's been good. In fact, I was just talking with one of the producers tonight, and we were originally, with television, we were going to just have like some of Chicago's highlights on there, but Milwaukee's highlights were so damn good that we're kind of recrafting the shows. So, right. Because the crowd, I don't know what it is about Milwaukee, and it's there's what I always call like the legacy or the heritage towns, which are Chicago, Philly, New York, Toronto.
Right.
And those, have been Ring of Honor towns since the inception of the company, it seems like. And none of those 4 towns have TV, so they're unique. But then there's all the TV towns, Milwaukee's one of them, that are just on fire.
Yeah.
And just they know everything. They know what's going on. You guys are stars, and it's just been awesome to see because you really see the power of television taking hold. So.
Right, yeah, I don't know what it is about Milwaukee. I feel like there's something they're putting in the beer there or the water because when the crowd is just from like that show, like you said, we have to show the highlights because there was so many quality matches from top to bottom. I actually watched, besides I had my match, but besides that, I watched literally every single match and I was like, wow, this crowd has not sat down for a moment. And then they literally to the last 3 matches, I thought absolutely tore the house down with Roddy and Hero and the 6-man tag. And then I was like, oh, man, I think they're going to be dead now. And then they were right there for Taven and Cole.
I was very surprised with that. And we talked about it in commentary because it's it's sort of just that natural letdown. And what will the crowd's influence be on this match?
Right.
And will it affect, the competitors?
Right.
Did you talk about Taven Taven's a big Celtics fan. Did you talk about the big air ball on the dive?
I did not get to that. I talked about the crowd chanting shots, but I completely slipped my mind that Taven did take a dive and the person who caught him was the hardwood floor.
He might have just clipped Cole with
I don't even know if he clipped him.
I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt.
I had talked to Taven after the match, and I was like, so how was that dive? And he said, honestly, my main concern was I thought I crapped myself after I hit the floor.
and he popped right up, and he was like, hey, all right, no crap. Let's move on.
Yeah. See, I think I would pop right back up if I thought I crapped myself. So that's just natural reaction. Not ever having
been a guy that's gotten paid to fall down like you guys do. I had one moment like that early in my career. The old Florida rings, the old railings that they used to have, that was sort of just like it had that little part that was just sort of notched out on the corner, right?
Right.
So I was quickly told as the ring announcer, go find out if this match is ready or if we're going to intermission next, or I can't remember what it was. And it was a very small crowd. Heel manager outside the ring sees me as I go up and over the railing, catch my foot, just smack, boom, on the gym floor. Popped up like nothing had happened, and nobody would have noticed except for this jack-off, Champagne Kane, who goes,
he's like Nelson from The Simpsons.
He was before there was Nelson, there was Champagne Kane. In fact, I think that's where Nelson Munt got it from.
I think so. I think that's the reaction you have to have, though. Like, you have to pop up like literally nothing happened. Like,
right. I'm like, I'm cool. Yeah. Everything's fine.
I didn't just fall. It's no big deal. Yeah,
did anything like that ever happen to you? Is there come on, there's got to be a crash and burn story somewhere.
I don't dive, and that's the biggest reason why I don't. I tell everyone I'll catch you any day of the week, but I am not diving because it's just not happening. I'm sure I'm sure there's something, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I'm sure I have completely ate shit at one point in my life and tried to pull it off like I didn't completely do it. But yeah, no, you mentioned you were talking about earlier on in your career, and one of the things I wanted to ask you with having you on the show is you've had the privilege of working for WWE and working for Vince, and now you're with Ring of Honor, and I know both kind of have their, I don't want to use the term styles, but I feel like there's such a huge difference between what you probably went through working there and what you're probably going through now working with Ring of Honor. And if you could maybe talk about what you feel, what's better, what's worse, what you liked, what you didn't like between working for the two different companies.
Well, when I first started with the WWF in 1996, it was a much older roster.
Right.
Than is in Ring of Honor. As it began to turn over, because we started to turn a lot of the talent over and start to bring in guys like the Hardys and Edge and Christian and,
Right.
let's just use those four as the prime example. There were a
Right.
lot of eyebrows being raised.
Right.
Like, what are we doing? And these guys better slow down. They better learn how to work. Blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And it was a vocal minority, but that was where Michael Hayes' influence was really positive, because he was able to remind Vince that this is different and they're not seeing this anywhere else on the card, and only these guys can do this, and it's special, and we're working on getting them to slow down. They are slowing down sort of organically, but boy, listen to the crowd, so
Right.
Vince understood that.
Right.
And with Ring of Honor, it's mostly young guys, and you've been historically one of the few exceptions that we never had to tell to slow down.
Right.
Only because that's your natural style.
Right.
You would have fit in very well with the veterans of the WWF in 1996.
They would have loved me.
Hey, look at this kid. And again, it's, boy, just take, if you can take some of that out and just put in, mean face or something, or show some emotion, boy, it'll be a heck of a lot better, and you'll have a much longer career. But I can tell you this, and and I hate to jinx it, Mike, I really do, but the same feeling that I had in the WWF when business really started to get hot
Right.
is the feeling that I'm getting now with Ring of Honor.
Right.
And I hate to say that because, like I said, I don't want to jinx it,
Yeah.
but damn, the crowds, the business is for Ring of Honor business, it's hot.
Right.
And it's really starting to pop. And not every house in Ring of Honor was or in WWF during the Attitude Era was a sellout.
Right.
Right. But there was a lot of internal communication back then to where, hey, we had 6,000, let's say, in Pittsburgh, and
Yep.
and they did $122,000, and that was the biggest house that we've had since 1980, whatever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, then it got to where it was sellout.
Right.
It took a while, but that feeling of, man, things are starting to pop.
Yeah.
I'm getting that feeling again about Ring of Honor.
Right. Yeah. And it's because I feel that way right now, and I don't know what it is, but like I had this conversation with Maria not that long ago, and it feels like we're onto something, and it feels like it's like not a revolution, but just something starting to boil. And we were trying to, and I want to ask you this question: What do you think is the reason that feeling that you're having and I'm having, and I feel like a lot of the guys in the back are having? Do you think it's just a combination of talent? Do you think it's the fact, like, I think a huge part of it, and not just because I'm biased, or maybe it is because I'm biased, but I think a huge part of it is always your champion, and having someone like Adam Cole as our champion is a phenomenal thing to get the ball rolling. But I feel like there's also just a lot of dynamics between storylines and who's feuding with who and who's wrestling who. What do you think is the reason, and if there's a bunch of reasons, give me the bunch of reasons why you're getting this feeling.
You're right. There are a bunch of reasons, and all the reasons that you mentioned, I think Cole as the champion is the perfect anti-hero. He's
Right.
the one that everybody's shooting for, and he's vulnerable on every occasion, so you always think that the title can change hands. And it's, and I'm not damning him with faint praise, but it's much the same way that you felt when you watched a Ric Flair match.
Exactly.
That there was that doubt, and tonight could be the night. But I'll go one step further, and I think it's more than just the culmination of what you see blended on television with what you see in the live events and the great action and all that. I think, too, it's the dynamic behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the good chemistry in the locker room.
Yeah.
Because that's something that's not really talked about. I wrote about it when I was in the WWF in like 99, and it was the night that they had, in May of 99 in Orlando, we had, I can't remember what it was, ran unopposed with Nitro and had the highest rating ever. It was like a 7.4 or whatever it was. And I took a picture during the day, or I had the photographer take a picture of Crash Holly, Prince Albert, and Val Venus sitting out back behind the Orlando arena, sitting in chairs with their shirts off, just getting some sun.
Right.
That was sort of the feel of the locker room.
Right.
just laid back, kick back, take it easy. Everybody had a good time.
Right.
And I kind of get that vibe now with Ring of Honor. Everybody seems to get along pretty well. There's no locker room drama, and I think it's making for a better product, which kind of goes in line with, it's kind of like happy wife, happy life.
Right.
You're going to remember that lesson, young man.
Yeah. I'll hold on to it. I'm writing it down right now.
Write that down. Happy wife.
Writing it down.
Happy life. But I think that kind of goes, when people are happy at work, they're going to kill it.
Yeah.
And if they like the people that they work with, man, it's just going to be something else. And I think that energy just sort of pervades everything that we do. It's like I've always enjoyed coming to work at Ring of Honor. I like it now more than I have any other time. Because, there were some guys there that I just kind of, I didn't care for, and they didn't care for me or whatever. And, part of some of the old guard. And, okay, they're gone. And not Davey and Eddie. So,
right.
Because I always got along good with those guys.
Yeah.
But and over the last couple of years, it's been just much more relaxed. And I think actually having Cornette out of the mix has been a good thing.
Yeah.
To be honest, I love Jim, and not that what Jim did was bad, but I just think that Jim was sort of he fought on a lot of things, and there was always a lot of strife because that's his personality.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think now it's much more zen and laid back, and I think that kind of fits the personality of the locker room.
Yeah, no, and it's funny that you say that because I've never really thought of it that way, but I've always, and especially within the last year, especially since I re-signed, like I've thoroughly enjoyed going to these shows, and I've looked forward to these road trips and the airports and the plane rides, and I think it's just like I've said for a long time, Ring of Honor has the greatest locker room in the world, and I think that extends past just talent. I think that extends to quality of people, and I can honestly say it's the first time in wrestling that I feel like the whole locker room is there for the betterment of the show, and it's to make sure I'm going to have this match so this match can do this, and we're all kind of looking out for each other, and I think that kind of falls in hand with the fact that we all just genuinely like each other and want to see each other succeed. Like, I know there are guys who have WWE tryouts coming up that personally I don't want to see them go because I want them to stay in the locker room, but on another personal level, I genuinely want to see them succeed because I like them as human beings. So I think I totally agree with you, and I've known that it kind of leads me into my next question where I've done you've known me for 10 years now, and it's been way too long, but
I was telling my wife the other night that, God, it's been 10 years since I've known Mikey. That's crazy.
It's been 10 years from that fateful trip down to ECWA.
Yeah.
And, who I wrestled what the hell was his name? The Amish guy, Benny or Betty? What?
Benny Stoltzfus.
Yes, I wrestled him, and he beat me in 2 seconds.
Right, pushing him versus Psycho Mike.
Yeah, that's right. I was just the sacrificial lamb.
That's it.
Okay. It's paying your dues, right?
That's right.
No, it brings me actually because we talk about locker rooms, and I mean, you've known me, and I've been doing wrestling on the independents for the past 10, 11, I don't know, lost count for how many years, and there are tons of locker rooms that I just sit there and I'm there by myself, and I'm literally shaking my head like, what in the hell am I doing here? I'd love, because I respect your opinion on wrestling so much. What is your opinion on independent wrestling as a whole? I mean, because I know it's kind of hot right now with PWG and this Beyond Wrestling and stuff like that, and everyone thinks it's on a roll, but there is still so many negatives to it. And what's I know you'll be brutally honest with me, so that's why I'm asking, what's your opinion on independent wrestling?
It seems to go... Regions there are some regions that are stronger than others.
Right.
And there are, again, you would think New York with 8 million people would have a really strong independent scene, but they don't.
Right. No.
And that's because they have a rather kind of oppressive commission system with antiquated licensing, and it's expensive, and there's not a lot of buildings to run.
Right.
And so what you find with is just there's not a lot of good promotions there, and those that try to run don't do it very well. And talking with Dr. Tom, like he struggles with this because he lives in Knoxville, Tennessee, and with traditionally a wrestling hotbed. Well, not necessarily hotbed, because Eastern Tennessee wasn't ever that great, but regardless, you would think there would be some guys that would know how to do it, and man, there's a bunch of clowns. I do go back. There really are the haves and the have-nots, because when you look at, because like we were talking about the Future of Honor show that we're doing on April the 18th,
right
here just north of me, in Newville, PA. Just some of the matches that we're starting to sketch out for this thing. It's going to be one of the best like independent shows.
Yeah, absolutely. With a lot of unknown guys and a couple of veteran guys sprinkled in, but it's going to be like an incredible show. It's difficult, people that where shows are good is they're run by good people, right?
And they've got good locker room leadership, or at least somebody that knows a thing or two about a thing or two.
Right.
The bad shows are the ones that are run by goofs who want to put themselves in the main event and, wear their fake title and think that they're somebody.
Right.
So I think it's up to the fan, and it'd be nice if the wrestling industry could kind of police itself.
Yeah.
But it never will.
I wish.
There were always guys that ran outlaw to, the territories, and they didn't last long, and most of the shows weren't very good, but
right.
They were just out to make a quick buck. But there's always been sort of that adversarial relationship between promotions, and if there was ever a time where it could kind of be like, hey, let's help each other out, at least regionally, it would be better. But that's, Pollyanna talking here. I don't think that's ever going to be that way.
Right. Yeah, I feel, and I kind of go off what you said, where it's kind of regional, where you really do get a feel and a vibe based on like who's training the schools there and
right.
who's running, because like where I'm from, New England, I feel there's just a hotbed of talent right now.
Agreed.
And maybe I'm biased, or maybe it's because I'm here, but with the likes of Steve Bradley having come through here, and Bob Evans still training, and Brian Fury and Ryan Drew and Spike Dudley, like there's just so much talent, and you see it in Ring of Honor where guys like me and Tommaso and Taven and now Hansen are all coming through, and Bob's there, and it really feels like New England has something special. And I know you kind of have a special connection with New England.
Oh yeah,
because
and I felt that from the minute I started coming around, like to WFA shows with Steve, and when he was first cluing me in as to what he was doing.
Right.
And then, working with Sheldon Goldberg, and then when Bob broke away from him and started doing EPW, Chaotic has always been chaotic, and of course it all sort of filters down from the Kowalski tree.
Right.
At the roots, whether, you took the Jeff Costa route, or however you did. But look at what like Todd Sopel's show last weekend that he had. I think he runs in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah, New Hampshire or Northern Mass somewhere.
Yeah. Very small, 150 people in there, but it was all kids, families,
yeah.
And they were red hot for everything, and it was great. And then I looked at the card for Top Rope. That's what an amazing card that is, and that's you and Guy on top, right?
Right, yeah, Guy's putting on the show for the Westport, I believe, the senior class, and
that's not just some friends and family fundraising show.
Yeah, no, it's stacked.
That is a stacked card,
right?
And that's the type of thing, where you get. And I see it here. Like I live in central Pennsylvania, right by the state capital of Harrisburg,
right?
And there's some horrible shows. The building that we're getting for the Future of Honor, the Big Spring Community Center. The lady I said, "You've had wrestling here before, haven't you?" She said, "Yeah, it wasn't really good." And I started to like run down some of the list of names that I had seen, like on the the poster on the grocery store wall, and I was like, is it like cousin this one and uncle this one? And she's like, oh yeah, they look horrible, like freaking backyarders.
That's the Great Destroyer versus
Rick
Johnson.
That's it. That's what we need, is the Great Destroyer to make a comeback.
The Great Destroyer will make his debut on Ring of Honor television against Cheeseburger.
Against Cheeseburger.
Stuff writes itself.
It does every time.
Speaking of New England wrestling, a guy who was a trainer up there, and anyone who is familiar with the Ring of Honor product, and you often talk about him during my matches, is the late Steve Bradley. I know you had the opportunity to know him fairly well, and people always hear me talk about him. And actually, a couple weeks ago, I did a show in Preston City over in the UK, and I was asked, who were you starstruck with when you first got in the ring and wrestled? And he was the person I mentioned, and he's just kind of a name I would like to bring back and let people to know more and more about. And I would love if you could kind of explain what your stories of Steve Bradley or your opinions of Steve. And I mean, we've all know he had his demons and he fought through those, but I really think besides Bob Evans, he's extremely pivotal in the reason why New England wrestling and guys like myself or Fury or Brandon Locke and Scott Reed have gotten opportunities.
Yeah, Steve, the way I think about all of you guys now, and I look at you and Taven and guys that have come through the camps and things like that, and people that I've worked with for a long time. It's sort of like my sons in a way. And
right.
I'll always have that level of pride for you. No matter what you do, no matter where you go, I'm always going to be proud of you. Bradley was kind of the first guy that I sort of felt that way about.
Right.
Even though I was, and he looked at me kind of as I guess sort of as an older mentor and somebody that he could just talk to.
Right.
That had that pseudo office feel about him, and at least I could, he would say, "Am I doing this right? Am I going in the right direction, or am I going crazy?"
Right.
And it would be most of the time I would say, "I don't know the answer to it, Steve, but I'll try to find the answer out for you."
Right.
And then he would call like with off the wall ideas, or not off the wall ideas, but just like real out of the box thinking, just trying to find a way to get in.
Right.
It breaks my heart, when I think about him and the way everything happened, because he was so damn talented. And
right.
I don't know what it was. It just I think really the lesson that we can learn from everybody in the wrestling business can learn from Steve is that you can never be afraid to take chances, but you've always got to have a backup plan.
Right.
And that's the one thing that Steve really didn't have, is that he started putting on shows, kids wrestling shows in elementary schools, middle schools, when he was a young teenager.
Yeah.
And these were not backyard shows, quote unquote. These were regular professional wrestling shows competed in a regular 16 or 18-foot ring.
Yeah.
And guys had wrestling gear and they looked polished. They were pretty damn good.
He was all self-taught too, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think there was probably a little bit, didn't he? I thought Silvano Souza trained him a little bit.
Yeah, I think a little, but for the most part, every conversation I always had, and maybe it was just Steve's anger not wanting to tell me who trained him, but a lot of it was he trained himself and just getting the taught on the road and taking his lumps on the road, and it just, for a guy to come out that talented and having just taught himself, it always blew my mind.
Yeah, he had great support from his family.
Right.
They certainly loved what he did, and it was. I never knew that he had any kind of problems.
Yeah.
But I guess I did know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing that's sort of like the heartbreak of it for me is
right.
that I have done something. But I'm sure you've said it. I'm sure P. Locke said it. I'm sure Al said it. Could any of us have done anything that would have changed the course of his life and got him going in another direction? And I don't think there is an answer for that.
No, and I don't think you can. I mean, I've seen a ton of people in my family too. You go through struggles with addiction, and it was so. I feel like for guys like me and Fury and Locke and Scott Reed, it was such a, and even Eddie Edwards to an extent, it was such a tough position because here's a guy that we literally admired and idolized so much that how do you tell someone you admire and idolize not to do something, because pretty much everything they do is okay in your eyes,
yeah, I know. And all of you guys were certainly not enablers, but
Right.
y'all would run through a wall for him.
Absolutely. And it's just because I think it's how we looked at him. And at the same extent, you go, well, you can't really tell your idol not to do what he's doing. He's your idol. You know, what do you can't even muster up stuff to talk to him normally about. So how are you going to tell him this? And, I think it was just a tough position for everyone he was with. And, but like I said, I think he's solely responsible. Well, not solely. And actually that kind of brings me to where I want to go next. He's one of 2 or 3 of people in this area that I think have helped turn this New England wrestling around. The other one's Bob Evans. And I know you have a really good relationship with Bob. And I really I had a conversation with Bob not that long ago, and I'd really like to get a different perspective, especially from someone who's, found talent in WWE and helps with talent in Ring of Honor, and really just explain how valuable of a mind Bob has, because I know you appreciate it just as much as I do, but I know there are a lot of guys in wrestling that, to steal a quote from someone I heard, think Bob's delusional. And I'd love for you to just explain why, because I don't think Bob's delusional. I take his opinion very seriously, and I know you do too. And I'd love for you to maybe explain why Bob has been so instrumental in guys like me and other people.
Well, I think you benefited from Bob because you opened up your mind to him.
Right.
I think those that might see him as delusional don't have the mental ability to process what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
But what he's saying is, what he talks about is wrestling at its most fundamental core.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a question of that's old school or that's the way things used to be done back in the old days.
Right.
Whenever wrestling has been done right,
mm-hmm.
that's the way Bob does it.
Right.
So it's not it's timeless what he teaches, because what he really instructs on is sound fundamentals and an ability to wrestle and to tell a story and to listen and to feel and to not have it all be just hokey choreographed bullshit.
Right.
It has to be real and genuine and react to, if you do this, it's the jazz musicians. They get on stage and they're just jamming with each other. They're not reading off of sheet music, man. They're just playing and they're feeling the notes and they're feeling what the drummer's doing and they're laying down they got the bass flowing. When I'm going to kick in with this clarinet, man, it's just going to be the right notes.
Yeah.
Because they know how to play.
Right.
That's wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So they just know how to work. They just know how to do it. And again, if you don't understand that about wrestling, I'm not one that says you can't be in it. You just don't get it. It's just try to open up your mind to it, and if you do, you'll understand it. Not everybody can do it. They're the greatest cellist or clarinetist in the world might not be able to play with a jazz band. They may only be able to play sheet music, but boy, they can hit the crispest notes.
Right.
And can play just beautiful sonatas and be part of the most wonderful orchestras ever. But they couldn't get up on stage and jam. So,
right.
It's frustrating, and I think again too, and Bob's learned a lot too, because part of the thing that and you may have talked about it, and forgive me for repeating it, Bob was an asshole a few years ago. And
he was
the first one to tell you about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just bitter, and
his way or the highway.
Sucked, and oh my God.
Yeah.
And he's really worked hard to turn his life and his attitude around, and he's done that with more than just wrestling. He's studied other people who are of positive mindset, and a lot of them seem to gravitate towards either like sales or sales training and things like that. And so that's where he and I talk a lot, is because we both study that.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I see him. Just greatly influential. And you see like a student of his that's not in wrestling anymore, Sean St. Ange.
Yep.
Who now is a trainer, a certified trainer, and moving very quickly up in the strength training world on an offshoot of a variety of CrossFit. And probably one day will be a published author and own his own series of gyms. But it's the lessons that he learned from wrestling and through studying and training with Bob.
Yeah, no, he was actually, Sean was, when I dislocated my knee back in November, he was who I went to rehab it. And
Oh, perfect.
yeah, just through his methods, that's why I'm back so quickly and where I am. But like you said, I think honestly what I took away from Bob the most was the emotion of pro wrestling, because I'm such a firm believer that wrestling will always evolve and change and switch, and one thing will be popular and another thing will be popular, and then something old is popular again. But I think at the very core of pro wrestling, it will always be about the raw emotion that the wrestlers portray to the fans and what the fans pour back into the wrestlers because of that raw emotion. And like you said, I feel like you use the analogy of jamming on a stage. I feel like when someone's jamming and truly going through it, you're feeling the raw emotion of the crowd that you're with, and you're feeling the raw emotion of the music, and you're just going with it. And that's truly what Bob instilled in me. And it was, you can go and you can plan your match A to Z, and you can hit those moves as clean and crisp as anyone else. But if you don't have that raw emotion and that feeling that the crowd is giving back to you, then I'm sorry, but that match just doesn't mean shit. It means absolutely nothing. And I guess to go back on what we were talking about, to me, that is what is missing the most in professional wrestling. And I think that's why and to tie it all together, I think that's why Ring of Honor is clicking on all cylinders right now, because we have a locker room full of guys who portray that raw emotion to the crowd. And
another thing too is that when you sit down to, if you look at a Ring of Honor event like a meal at a very fancy restaurant, let's say for example, and there's multiple courses.
Yeah.
You don't get 4 courses of steak.
Right.
You don't get 4 courses of dessert.
Right.
And so every match at a Ring of Honor show has that spot, and it's in that spot for a reason. Mm-hmm. So that at the end of the meal, at the end of the show, you wind up very satisfied. You've had some salad, and you've had some beef, and you've had some side dishes, and then you've had some dessert, and you washed it down with some wine, and it was a wonderful meal.
Right.
And that's what Ring of Honor is, and that's what a good show can be too. Is that it's multiple courses. Just because you were in the main event last night, tonight you're in the opener. Hey, 6 to 8 minutes, kid. Just get them warm, get them in the seats, and that's it. That's all we need tonight.
Know your role, I suppose.
Know your role.
So, yeah, and I think it drives me nuts because I'm fortunate enough where I get to do a lot of shows and people bring me in and it's awesome and I get to meet new people, and I'm fortunate enough where I'm in a position where guys actually have started coming up to me and asking me for their opinion, and I feel like it's just what you said. I'm like, you were second match and you were given 6 to 8 minutes. Why are you trying to steal the show from the main event? Mm-hmm. And a show is, like you said, it's a 3-4 course meal. And that's what's totally missing. And I think what gets lost in translation is people think that, well, the crowd has to be into it. So in order for the crowd to be into it, that means I have to set the world on fire and they have to say that my matches were 4 or 5 stars or anything less than 3 stars. I'm not okay with. And it's like, your match is not about stars. Your match is about the course of the show and how the show goes, and I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again, where it's you have to know your role on the card. And it's so funny that was a famous catchphrase in wrestling, because it goes hand in hand with what wrestling truly is. You need to know your role and just do it.
Right. The frustrating thing is when and again you talk to guys and they go, how was my match tonight? Right. Well, they were the third match on the show. Okay, mm-hmm. Let's just say, for example. And I go, I don't know. Did you get hurt? Uh-huh. No. Did you hit your time? Yeah, I guess. Was the outcome what it was supposed to be? Yeah. Then it was great. Right. It was perfect. Uh-huh. You didn't do anything horrible, and you didn't do anything that outshined the main event. Right. It was the third match on the show, and you didn't get hurt, and you hit your time, and everything seemed to go well, and you got paid. Right. That's a good night. That's a fantastic night, especially the last one. So it's like, what are the, I don't know. I just feel like, shut up. Right. And this is sometimes with some of the younger guys in ROH, we're learning them and teaching them, and it's like, and they come to me, and I'm like, I don't care about what you did, your moves or whatever. Don't ask me about that stuff.
Right.
Did you show emotion? Did
Yeah.
you make me care?
Mm-hmm.
You can make somebody care in the opening match. That's how you become a main eventer.
Right.
Just make me care, and
it's-
don't try to do too much. Don't try to outperform your pay grade, because you're going to piss somebody off if that's the case.
Yeah, and I always feel that way, and I feel like we're in a time in wrestling now where guys are starting to care far too much about what they're writing on the internet, as opposed to you were hired at Ring of Honor for a job, and do your job, and if you don't do your job, then that's why you're going to lose your job, not because so-and-so is writing that your match was 2 stars or 3 stars. That doesn't mean shit. We're all put in a position to shine, and we're all put in a position to make other people shine. And so I think it's just a matter of knowing what position you're in at the moment. And I'm right there with you.
One of the things that you do, and I don't want to interrupt, but you mentioned about writing on the internet, and I thought you were talking about what they're doing is they're reading critiques and then evaluating their mindset based upon those critiques.
Yes.
I thought you were going to start to get into people actually physically going online and writing stuff that I think takes away from the fans' ability to willingly suspend their disbelief.
Right.
That guys forget that if you're under an assumed name, okay, let's say, because even Ricky Steamboat, that's not his real name,
right?
Bruiser Brody, that wasn't his real name, but if he got on there and if he wrote like Frank Goodish, it would have killed his mystique.
Right.
It would have killed, if Abdullah the Butcher would have been, talking and things like that, that would have killed his mystique. Now, again, we're not in those days. We're not in the 60s and the 70s. I understand that.
Yeah.
But the fans still want to believe.
Yeah.
They want to be entered because, again, it wasn't that people believed or didn't believe. Yes, you would have some fight and debate. But the majority of it was, did you want to believe?
Right.
Or did you think it was nonsense?
Right.
Well, if you wanted to believe, then you would watch it. And if it was hokey, you'd go, geez, that looks fake.
Right.
And then if something looked good, you'd go, damn, that looked good.
Yeah.
I think guys have to stop going online and being what they're not.
Right.
The guys like the Young Bucks, Carl Anderson, I'll single them out from New Japan. Holy hell, they either make me laugh or they make me wince with what they say on Twitter, because it's so biting and sarcastic, but that's exactly who they are.
Right. It's consistent.
They're these rich asshole guys that are just running amok in Japan, making money, throwing up the Wolfpack sign. They don't give a crap about anybody or anything.
Right.
That's the way everybody needs to be. Now, Mike, you have a luxury.
Right.
You have a luxury because of who you are, and who you are is an extension of your natural personality.
Right.
So you can talk about things. You can talk about political issues and social issues, and you have the ability to do that. Yes, when it's time to get mad and talk about wrestling stuff, you can do that, and you do that very well. But that's a nice thing to have, is to be able to be that real person too.
Right. No, I've been lucky with that, and I always kind of look at it like, as a professional wrestler, you're playing this character, and fans want to believe you are that character. And it's like if you go see a Superman movie and he's fighting the villain, but for the whole hour and a half of that movie, he's Superman. He never stops being Superman. But it would be like, I kind of compare it to if halfway through he fights the villain, he beats the villain, and then they just stop the movie, and then the guy playing Superman kind of looks at the villain and goes, "That was a good fight. Thanks for that." And then they just go back to the movie again. Fans don't want to see that. They don't want to. They don't want to see the fact that these two really don't hate each other. They want to believe that they actually hate each other, that they despise each other, and and that's why I think sometimes storylines in wrestling either work really well or they don't work really well. And I feel like the ones that do work really well are the ones that are kind of built organically. And that's why I always go back to, like, I felt like my feud with Steen was one of the best things I've ever done, just because it was kind of built organically. And unfortunately, it happened for a very sad reason with BJ and everything, and luckily he's okay now. But that whole thing kind of built organically, and we kind of took it in a way where this is kind of real life, and we kind of added some elements of real life, and then the fans believed that I was one way and Steen was another way, and we were two total opposites, and then they wanted to see us kill each other.
Right. And what did it begin with? It began with on the surface, a rather hokey argument, right?
Yeah.
But after what you had done, and with the emotional connection that the fans had with you,
yeah,
and the emotional connection that the fans had with Steen, now even the silliest of argument can really be a good reason to have a fight.
Right.
You know, the bully is the leader of the because we had, when I went to school, the blacks would fight the rednecks. You know,
Right.
and that was a thing. Occasionally the rednecks would fight the Spanish guys, but there weren't as many Spanish guys. But it was
Right.
mostly the blacks and the rednecks. Okay,
Right.
what would they be fighting over? Nobody knew.
Yeah.
They just wanted to see the fight.
Exactly.
You know, and you either were on one side or the other. I always, slid towards my brothers over there, and I'd be like, yeah, asses. Good.
Right.
But you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Steen versus Bennett worked because, hey, I just cared about the guys. I wanted to see
Right.
Steen whip your ass.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said, it started. And I remember when it first started, and people were, they were like tweeting me and giving a shit. Like, really? This is what they're arguing over? And in my head, I just kept going, give it some time. Give it some time. Just let it marinate. And
Right.
And I think that's how the best feuds always start. They start out of something, but you just have two guys that people want to see fight. And so, but at the end of the day, who the hell cares what they were arguing over? Now we just want to see them kill each other.
I remember giving Vince Russo the idea, and just that he happened to be stumped for what to do. He came up with a lot of great ideas when he was, helping Vince write Raw, no doubt about it, and SmackDown.
Right.
But this particular week he happened to be stuck. So we went to the Stanford Mall for lunch, A&W root beer, and I just was like, wouldn't it annoy the hell out of Steve Austin that Vince comes down to the ring and was wearing his belt around his waist? Every other champion that he's given the belt to the night after they've won it, he's held it in the crook of his arm. But for whatever reason with Steve, he was wearing it around his waist. Wouldn't that annoy the shit out of Steve Austin?
Yeah.
And wouldn't Steve Austin, in his mind, say, you're probably running around in your underwear showing off to Linda, hey, look, this is what the real corporate champion should look like.
Right.
It's you, Vince, isn't it? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you an opportunity to have the champion that you've always wanted, Vince, and that's you. That's right, tonight, this one night. You and me for the WWF Championship. We do this the easy way or the hard way. Mm-hmm. Easy way is you fight me here. Hard way is I come back there and I whip your ass. Now, what do you say? That was the simplest thing, right?
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely.
And that was how. And I looked at Russo. I was waiting for him to be like, it's terrible. It's a horrible idea. And he was like, no, actually, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And he says, I think we'll try that. I said, well, I got to run it by Vince. So we ate lunch, went back. He went upstairs, waited for Beth to buzz him in. He was back downstairs in 10 minutes. I go, what did he say? He loved it. We're going to do it. No shit.
It's the little things.
That's just it. It doesn't have to be rocket science. We don't have to figure out the most convoluted of things. I mean, everything can be logical, but if emotion is preeminent, then it doesn't have to be logical.
Right. Absolutely.
And where Russo got tripped up was that he saw that as a reason why you can get away with anything.
Right.
But he forgot at the core is that there needed to be an emotional connection with the characters.
Right. Exactly.
If the characters are one-dimensional, then no matter what you do with them is never going to resonate with the audience emotionally because there's no reason to care about one-dimensional, vapid characters who have no soul, no allegiance, and are just shades of gray.
Yeah, no, and I think it goes to show that at the very end, you can really it doesn't matter what they're arguing about. Is if they're invested in it, then they're invested in the two guys. They're not invested in what they're arguing about. Just the two people who are arguing.
That's right.
And I think that's the biggest lesson. Now, real quickly, I have a few more questions, and I'll let you go because I know it's getting late and it's almost time for sleepy time. But just you've had the privilege of looking for talent for WWF, for WWE at the time, and now for Ring of Honor. And I feel like you probably get the question a lot. What's Ring of Honor looking for? You probably no one knows what WWF is looking for, but if you if you could maybe give advice to guys, because I know I've gotten a lot of independent wrestlers tell me, I listen to your podcast and this and that, and I'd love for you to maybe, what's the few things that guys can do to better themselves, or what is it that when you see a guy wrestle a dark match or a tryout match that you say, because I know someone wrestled in Chicago who you're a big fan of, and I'll let you say who it was, and he absolutely tore the house down by doing absolutely nothing. But what is it you're looking for? What is it that you think guys on the indies should be working on to maybe get a look by Ring of Honor or get a spot in the company?
Guy in the dark match who we're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There is, okay, so what's Ring of Honor looking for? There's not a scientific formula, but I can tell you this, that where I think the WWE's mind is closed, Ring of Honor's mind is open.
Right.
They have such a narrow pinhole view of what they think a star can be. And that's for two reasons. One is because they really hold their opinion in high regard. They think a lot of themselves. But at the same time, they don't want to be the guy that's wrong. So,
right. Yeah.
So what you wind up with is, a lot of, hey, we brought him down. We thought he could do a great job, but I don't know. Maybe, right. You like him. I love him. Hey.
Yeah, right.
But I think, with Ring of Honor, there's a few things. If you can come to a tryout camp and if you can show a good grasp of the fundamentals, but in such a way to where everything has emotion behind it,
right,
then they look past some flaws.
Right.
They look past, like, wow, you really made me care when you spoke. I really felt the emotion in that, and I can see, your movements in the ring, and there always is, well, there's probably some things that you could clean up and do differently, and generally the number one focus is gear.
Right.
A lot of guys have crummy gear, and that's because gear is expensive.
Right.
And I'm not saying, but if you're going on a job interview, you're not wearing the rumpled suit out of, the cutout bin from Goodwill.
Right.
You're going to press it off, and it's going to look nice, and you're going to accessorize it, so you make sure that you get the job that you want.
Right.
And just thinking about that dark match on Saturday, because there were two guys in that I love.
Yeah.
And that match was put together exactly for that reason, because it was a perfect showcase of each one. You had Jake Durden, who's 6'7", right, and is I think the love child of Bruiser Brody and Mankind. Okay, I think they had sex.
Yeah.
And Jake Durden was their evil spawn.
Sounds about right.
And then the other guy, Will Ferrar, the hype, part of Team Benchmark, probably 5'7".
Yeah.
But a little bump machine, ball of energy. And what you got was a 3-minute dark match that because I did the ring announcing for it, and I watched the whole thing from the curtain. And when Brian Gorey called for the bell, I walked away and I was like, I think that might be the best dark match I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
Right.
Because it was an exact showcase of what the guys could do. It only took them 3 minutes to show it.
Right.
But, and then you look at Tyson Dukes, who wrestled you, and, you in Milwaukee, and you and Elgin in Chicago.
Right.
And that's a guy that's been knocking on the door for a long time. And sometimes when you're at that stage, man, you got to do anything it takes. You got to rely on friends. You got to break some rules.
Yeah.
And he did that. He did some things that guys in those spots normally don't do.
Right.
I respect him for doing it because,
right.
Damn, he's been doing this 17 years, and he's got fire and determination, and he feels like he deserves a job, and has never been better than now. And I would do the same thing if I was him in his spot.
Yeah.
I'd
he
go out
does.
there and balls to the wall, whatever. I'll apologize later. Did I do too much? I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's always easy to, apologize. What is to say? It's always easier to say I'm sorry than it is to ask for permission. Or
right, better to ask for forgiveness than
forgiveness. Yeah, exactly. And that's how I always look at it. And he's someone, Tyson, that I think deserves a spot with Ring of Honor because he was awesome. And I agree with you 100%. I think it's just highlighting what you do your best and showing everyone that that's what you do. And I think you know that's always been the biggest thing that I've taken away from everything you've taught me. But you know, with that, I guess I want to say thanks for joining us. And I know I'd love for people to. I know you have your own podcast. I love for you to give out the information, and then for where people can reach you on Twitter and all that fun stuff. So where can people listen to your pod? Which I had a blast doing, by the way. So
thank you. That was a lot of fun, and I got a ton of great feedback. And the one consistent thing I got in terms of feedback from the show and from the guys who produced the show too was, wow, I didn't know Bennett was like that. He's a lot different than I thought he was going to be.
Right.
You know, in a really good way. Like, I think people just have this mindset. Why? Because you make them believe when they see you on television. So, to reach me on Twitter is very easy. It's at Real Kevin Kelly. And I'm always around and doing something. Every couple of weeks we get together on the Place to Be Nation, and we do a podcast. I call it Finish Strong because that was a church message that I got at the end of last year, and I really wanted to start to bring sort of a different messages of positivity and all kinds of things out. And you know, I have wrestling guests, but like you know, I started with Cole, and then AJ Styles was my first two guests. But then I had Hanson, and we talked about his recovery from injury and what he's done, and then we had you, and then next I'm going to have Adam Pearce. So it's going to be a lot of different talk and a lot of different conversation, and that's every other week on the Place to Be Nation. The PlaceToBeNation.com. There's actually a lot of really good, smart shows on there about more than just wrestling. So that's fun.
Awesome. And and I guess you can catch Kevin every week on Ring of Honor TV too, right?
Yeah, until they kick me out of the chair, or you know, whatever, or if I'm dead, just it'll be all right. No worries.
Until they give you the boot.
Just drop elbows on me if I ever stroke out there ringside.
Yeah, you know, you always have Carino to pick up the slack. So,
oy vey.
Well,
all right,
Kevin,
Mike.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man. I'll talk to you soon. Okay?
Yeah, I'll see you in Dayton in a couple of weeks.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
And there you have it, Mr. Kevin Kelly. Kevin has been such a great friend of mine for so long. I met him when I was just a wee lad back in 2003 after he got first let go by the WWE or F or whatever the fuck they were calling themselves at that point. He did a camp for Bob Evans, and some of it, you know, this is not just me blowing smoke up his ass. Some of the best advice I've ever gotten has been straight from Kevin. He's the one who taught me perception is reality, and you know, and that's one of the strongest lessons I've ever learned in professional wrestling, and that's perception is reality, and is that if that crowd perceives it to be one way, then that is real, and that goes for everything. Kevin was the first one who taught me always dress nice to an event, and whether it's an indie show in East Bumfuck, Maine, or you're going to WrestleMania, you dress the part, dress for the job that you want, not for the job you already have. And Kevin was the one who taught me that, because he said, if you walk in and you look like $1 million and people perceive that you look like $1 million and they think and perceive you're $1 million, then the reality is that you are $1 million. And he's helped numerous people out, and I'm glad you guys got to listen and hear and everything that he could teach, and it's just, he's been a really good friend of mine. There's a ton I wanted to get to. I wanted to get his opinions on Cornette and Delirious and everyone else, but unfortunately time restrictions keep us from doing that. But you know, like I was saying before, Ring of Honor is tearing the house down. It's sweeping the country and sweeping the nation. And before, Kevin hopped on, I was going to say in Chicago, I had my match with Jay Lethal, I think, was a perfect example of what we were talking about, where you just have to feel the raw emotion of a crowd, because I felt like we did that the first few matches. We were on third, and the first few matches, they were excellent wrestling matches, but the crowd just wasn't into it. And that was the reason, because the crowd wanted to feel like they were part of the show and they wanted to be played with. So me and Lethal kind of threw out the playbook, and I've wrestled him a million times where I was comfortable enough to do that. And we just went and we played with the crowd and had fun. And, by the end of the match, they were laughing and cheering and joking and giving me shit and cheering for Lethal. And it was just one of those matches where you said, you see, you feel the emotion, you have fun with it, and at its very core, I truly 100% believe that that's what pro wrestling is all about. I'm not really going to rant about it, because I ranted about it plenty of times. I've ranted about heels and baby faces, and I've ranted about what's good in pro wrestling, but I feel like the moral of this podcast is that at its very core, wrestling is about emotion. And I don't think anything speaks more true to that than what's going on with Daniel Bryan right now. I mean, it's just raw emotion that those people feel that Daniel Bryan has been the underdog his entire fucking life. And they've done it in a way that he's still the underdog, even though he's on TV and he's probably making more money than the U.S. government. He still gives people that vibe because of how he looks and because of how he dresses and because of literally, honestly, how he wrestles is why people always will believe he's the underdog. And that's why there's that yes movement. That's why the crowd's into it. That's why people want to see him succeed. And that's why Triple H and Stephanie play the greatest foes to his hero, because they're the upper elite and they're the upper class and they're keeping down. It's kind of why Austin and Vince work so well, because Austin was this redneck who drank beer and he was doing what everyone else wanted to do, and that was to flip off their piece of shit boss. And they're kind of doing that with Bryan right now, but in a PG kind of way. There's no beer, there's no middle fingers, there's no swearing, but there's yes chants, and there's Bryan fighting for what he believes in, and it's true and it's raw and it's just it's real emotion. And like I said, at its very core, that's what pro wrestling is all about. Now, before we wrap this show up, I want to thank everyone who is a listener and who listens. You guys have made this podcast super successful to the point, where we have viewers listening to just me. My lovely fiance isn't even here, and you guys are kind enough to listen to my boring Boston accent voice, and I truly 100% appreciate that. The numbers of listeners are in the tens, hundreds of thousands, and we're just over 9,000 subscribers, and that's people who subscribe to the podcast, who are constantly listening. So that's awesome. And we just truly appreciate it. And I know Maria would say the same thing. We absolutely appreciate everything you guys do. So thank you so much for listening. And we have to, mention our sponsors at the end of the day, specifically ProWrestlingTees.com. With over 800 T-shirts available from indie stars to WWE legends, you can now buy T-shirts created and sold by your favorite professional wrestlers at, like I said, ProWrestlingTees.com. But if you're looking for something a little more fun, be sure to check out BarbershopWindow.com for some of the greatest nostalgic and humorous, not humorous, he is a trainer down in NXT, humorous wrestling tees available on the internet. So that's ProWrestlingTees.com and BarbershopWindow.com. Trust me, me and Maria work through ProWrestlingTees.com, and they have some pretty badass T-shirts there, whether it's indie wrestlers from Kevin Steen or Jay Lethal or Jimmy Jacobs, and Barbershop Windows has really cool, old, nostalgic professional wrestling tees. So, go check them out. And and again, I'm sorry that Maria couldn't be here. Like I said, it's unfortunate, the circumstances, but Maria is a very strong woman, and I guess I'd like to kind of close the show a positive note, that it's in the past week or so with everything going on with Maria, it really brings things into perspective. It really brings your family into perspective, and her family was affected with colon cancer. And, as I do this podcast and my buddy Guy sits across from me, his family was affected by cancer. And it really makes you feel, my grandmother was affected with cancer. And it really makes you feel to really appreciate the life you have and the life you live, and, not take anything for granted, and just appreciate everything you do. And I get to travel the world for a living, and I get to see different places, and I wrestle for a living. I'm living as a little boy. This is what I dreamed about doing. And sometimes I get so caught up in the petty bullshit of life that, you don't take a second to sit back and reflect and say, wow, whether you're working a 9-to-5 job, or whether you're a garbage man, or you're working behind a desk, or you're working on a phone, or you're working on a golf course, or you're an actor, or you're a musician, or a teacher, or a lawyer, or anything you do, the gift of life is just that. It's the ultimate gift. So I know I'm getting emotional now, but I've had an emotional couple of days with Maria, and I'd just like to share it with you all. So cherish the ones you love, cherish the life you live, because it's precious, and enjoy it. And next week, Maria will be back, and she'll be her typical bubbly self. And I know all her fans can't wait to have her back. But Maria, we love you. Hurry on back. And on that note, we will see you next time. Thank you again to Kevin Kelly, and peace.
Off with my head, I fell in love again. Off with my head, I fell in love again. You lose your head, you lose your heart. Off with my head, I fell in love again. Off with my head, I fell in love again. You lose your head, you lose your heart. Fall apart.
This has been a production of fanoff.com.
And that's perfect.
And that's perfect.